Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another long overdue episode of The Fat Minute. I'm your host, Don John, here tonight with my co host, the boy who cried wolf, BVJ.
Yeah, hey,
It took you a while to respond to that one.
because again, I knew there was a joke there, but I couldn't find it.
That's okay. It happens to the best of us. How you
Yeah,
been since last episode? It's been a while.
yeah. When was our last episode?
Um, uh, b- like maybe March. It's been a few months.
Yeah,
Maybe no,
um,
no, maybe April.
yeah. I've been okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been fine. I mean, you know the answer to that, but for everybody else, I've been fine. I got a few random things I've been up to that we can catch up on.
Okay. Yeah, just to start off, sorry everyone for the long wait between episodes. That's my bad. Sorry, depressed. Won't happen again. Um, anyway,
Um, you know what? Don't apologize. We don't have a Patreon that people donate to. We don't have to apologize for shit.
I like the way you think. Um, yeah, let's get into it. What have you been up to? What have you been getting into? What's
Well,
what's been keeping you going?
well, I mean, obviously, I went to the movies a couple times in 2021, and then a
Hmm.
few more times in 2022 last year. And over the last few months, I really started going back to the movies,
Hmm.
um, especially like with living pretty close to a couple different theaters that are nicer than the one I left.
Yeah, dude, like the theater that you and I typically go to whenever I'm in town, like that's easily my favorite movie theater that I've ever been
Yeah,
to.
yeah. We'll have to go to another one soon. But so I really started returning to the synagogue, and get it? 'Cause cinema.
Yes, I get it.
Okay, so for starters,
The Cinemagog.
I didn't get around to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Me either.
Truth be told, like leading up to it, I just didn't care. Like I didn't care anymore. And
Yeah, like I mean, I don't really care about the Guardians to begin with. I mean, the movie looks fine. I've heard great things about it. I'm sure I'll see it at some point. It's just, yeah.
and I kept hearing that like it's like an emotional gut punch and it gets really sad and even depressing. And I just wasn't interested in that. Like I heard like especially if you're sensitive to animal abuse because I guess it goes into like the origin of Rocket Raccoon.
Hmm.
And a coworker of mine, a buddy of mine, he said like it got to a point where he felt that like the movie was trying too hard. He felt like I felt like my emotions were having like a full on like assault. Um,
Oh, this sequence must have been directed by Sarah McLachlan.
Jesus. And I was like, yeah, I just want. So fast forward, I saw the Flash movie,
Hmm.
and it was okay. It was a movie called The Flash.
it was a movie.
um, I guess it definitely was like a bittersweet sign of my age and maturity because like 10 years ago I would have been devastated if like this movie finally came out and it didn't like live up, and it was like trying to be like an epilogue to the Snyderverse or DCEU or kind of sort of but not really. They did but they kind of didn't make it like that, what I said, the farewell to the Snyderverse. But 10 years ago I would have been devastated that it was like, I guess, underwhelming or at least just, not up to my hopes. And when it ended, my wife was like, "What'd you think?" And I was like, "It was fine, I guess." And she goes, "I'm sorry." And I go, "It's just a movie." Like, I felt like I finally reached a new phase of my life. Like,
Yeah,
it's just a fucking movie.
yeah.
um, so I mean, it's it is disappointing that like after all that production hell, and I mean like that movie went through production hell, that like it just ended up like that, and it was so expensive, and like the CGI in it just doesn't look good. Um, And can we do spoilers? Do you care if we do spoilers?
I don't care.
Okay, and then like I mean, it's over a month old and it bombed in theaters anyway. So if you're mad that like I spoiled it, why didn't you go see it over 30 days ago? Like I don't feel
Also,
sorry for you.
also, if you're mad that he spoiled it, we mentioned that we're going to spoil it about 5 times already. So why didn't you just turn the Spotify off?
Yeah. So first of all, like a problem is like it's not. If you think about it, it's not really a multiverse movie. It's a time travel movie, and then they just use the whole multiverse like crutch or
Formula.
card to explain why Michael Keaton is there. Even though if you think about it, that's like a plot hole. That doesn't make sense because the point of the movie is the Flash going back in time to make his dad look innocent and not get blamed for the murder of his mom. So he like fiddles with an event that happens in the 90s. Why the hell would that change who Batman is? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like cuz Bruce Wayne would have been born decades upon decades earlier and he would have already become Batman at least a decade before this event cuz it kind of hints that he became Batman like the Ben Affleck Batman became Batman in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. So like how does that make him older and Michael Keaton? That doesn't I need to see your math homework on that one. But and then towards the end of the movie, they're like they basically do like a giant like cameo parade of all these different multiverses crashing into each other. And they show like CGI Christopher Reeve and if Nicolas Cage had been Superman,
Hmm.
and they had to use CGI to portray them, and it it didn't look good. I'm sorry, and I'm like, this is what cost $200 million, and that's a whole other ball of wax of like, movies have become too expensive.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's there could maybe be an even bigger discussion about it in the future, but I don't know. Maybe one day they'll make a Flash movie that's actually about the Flash and not like a movie called The Flash where it's like, oh, like Michael Keaton's Batman is in it. It's like, well, eventually you do plan on having like actual Flash characters in your Flash movie, right?
No.
I don't
Money
know.
down.
I'm all about that one clip that Trevor showed us from the CW like Legends of Tomorrow or whatever, where Gorilla Grodd busts into like a college dorm, and you're like, "Where's this going?" And this like black college student is getting up all startled, and Gorilla Grodd's just like Barack Obama. Like you you could have given me a million guesses what was going to be the first line out of Gorilla Grodd's mouth, and I would have never guessed it was Barack Obama. Which then leads to like the worst pun of all time later in the episode, apparently, where they're like, all right, you guys go this way, we'll go that way, we're on Obamacare. And it's like,
Jesus Christ.
no. So then so then after that, I took my dad to see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And it was okay. Like it was just sad though. Like the story itself is sad. It actually it really is like a sad movie when like you really like think about it. And then like he's just so old and that's sad to watch and it makes me feel old and that's sad to think and
That was my thing is I'm just like Harrison Ford's like 80 fucking years old. What are we doing trying to make him an action hero? Like
and it's like
who wants to see that? I don't want to see that.
and it's just like it's one thing and obviously I love Indiana Jones more than I ever did Star Wars. But like at least as Han Solo, like he could stand still and shoot like the blaster. Like, but Indiana Jones is very like stunt dependent
Yeah.
and I I'm sorry like he's like in his 80s and he's like outsmarting all these Nazis in their 20s and I just but and I get it, it's a fantasy, like it's historical fantasy and it had some fun moments, but truth be told, like I thought the Crystal Skull was a more fun experience. I'm one of those people, I'm one of the few people in the world that did not have any resentment towards the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But anyway, like I do think it's interesting how the Indiana Jones saga kind of mirrors my own life in a way. and hear me out on that, which
Yeah,
is
I'm gonna need some elaboration, bud.
no. Hear me out here. Hear me out here.
Okay, okay.
I'm not making a joke here. The original trilogy. Childhood is so rad. It's a blast. Just have fun. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I was like, about to graduate high school, and I was an older teenager. Okay, well, you won't have the exact same fun that you did when you were a little kid, but just try to make the most of it right now. And then you have the Dial of Destiny. You can't repeat the past. Nothing will ever be as new and magical as it once was when you were a little kid or even a teenager, but just enjoy that you're still here. So that's my way of looking at it, is that saga kind of mirrors what life is. It's like nothing will ever be as out of this world fun as when you were a little kid, and then even when you're a teenager, just make the most of it. And now it's just like, just be happy you're still here. I don't know. Maybe that's a much more depressing way to word it, but
Yeah, I kind of need to. I need to talk to my therapist after hearing that.
so then I saw Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and holy shit, it was just incredible. Like, I absolutely loved it. Like, we could be like, "Oh, I can't buy like Tom Cruise being 61 years old doing that." Like, he is doing it. Like, he's doing all those stunts himself. Like, he drove that motorcycle off that cliff.
Maybe there's
Um,
something to the Scientology nonsense.
honestly, it's like they got rid of his body fetins or whatever the hell it's called. But no, it was absolutely amazing. I loved it.
You know,
Like, I love the last.
I've never seen a single one of those movies.
I mean, and I don't know what to tell you now, because like those movies almost have to be seen in a movie theater on a big screen. So like, as far as like, the ones that like have already come out and are already on like video and streaming, I don't even know what to suggest or how to suggest it, but I promise you they really are good, and like they deliver. And like, we don't have like just action movies anymore. Not as much. Like, somebody either has to be like, super powered or supernatural or some kind of science fiction explanation to their fighting and whatnot. But we don't have as many like just action heroes, like a human being performing stunts and like, fighting as much as we did in the 80s or 90s. But I would say just the first two are kind of worthless. I'm sorry. Like, the series really started to develop its like emotion and attitude with the third film and on. So I don't know. Maybe one day we'll sit down and I'll try to show them to you. But if you're not into them, I won't fault you for it. But I mean, I recommend them. I think they're great, and I think like he delivers the goods. He's the real deal. Um, so and then the local movie theater also will show like older movies. So I took my mom to the Birdcage. Um,
I wish I could have gone to that with you too.
Oh, it was. I mean, that's my favorite comedy of all time. I think that is the funniest film ever made, personally. And I mean, my family and I. You want to talk about just some loud laughter, like us watching that movie? It's great. And then I saw Jaws, and that was fun. That was fun. I love Jaws. I mean, I always like Jaws, and that was fun to experience on the big screen. So I like that they do that.
Yeah, I
What about
think
what about
I
what
wish
about
that
you?
was. Well, I'll get to me, but yeah, I like that theater near you does that where they'll show older movies every so often.
Hmm.
Like I wish that was something, especially now in the age of like streaming and everything, where it is becoming harder to justify and motivate people to go to the theater. Um, I think I wish more theaters would do that, like where they would show like older movies. Um, because not only is it a chance to experience, movies that like you couldn't experience in theaters. Like I would have loved to have seen The Godfather in theaters, but it came out 20 years before I was born, so I didn't get to.
Right.
Um, I think one, you get that experience for people who missed out on it for whatever reason, and two, it's also just another way for theaters to make revenue. Um,
Yeah. And it's also for whatever it's worth, like when they show an older movie, it's a cheap ticket. It's much cheap.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
when they do it, it's like $5, and I'm like,
right.
to rent a movie on like Amazon on your Fire TV is like $2.99. So it's like,
Right.
okay, so for a couple dollars more, you get to make a date out of it. You get to like
Right.
go have that like big experience. So like,
Right.
why not?
And
Yeah.
it's also like I'm sure like because when you buy a ticket for like like a new release, it's what like we'll say like $15,
Yeah,
give or
yeah, and
take.
even that's being a little generous. Yeah,
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 like give or take, we'll say $15 on average, and maybe like $1 of that ends up going to the theater's pocket because the most of it goes to the studio
yeah.
and the distributor. So, but like when you're showing a movie like 30 or more years old, like I highly doubt like most studios are really giving a shit about the profit on that movie anymore.
Right.
So I would imagine more of that $5 goes to straight to the theater.
Yeah.
I could be
Yes.
wrong on
Yes.
that, but that's just my guess.
No, no, no. Because I mean, this might be apples and oranges in the grand scheme of things, but I'm leaning towards you being closer to the point or closer to the truth there because when I worked at the movie theater, when a movie was like brand new, I mean like opening weekend, we made virtually nothing off of it.
Right,
But the more weeks it existed at our theater, it would we would start to get a higher and higher percentage of it.
right.
So when a movie was like if we had been able to hold on to a movie for 6 or 7 weeks, we were making most of the money from the ticket sales. Granted, less people were going,
Right.
but yeah. So yeah, I would dare say Universal made most of the money it was ever going to make on Jaws already.
Yeah.
Um, and it depends on the movie. Like Jaws, like you got to admit, like that does sound like a movie that probably benefits from the big dark theater experience.
Yeah.
Now, granted, as much as I love this next movie I'm about to mention, I don't think I ever need to see it in theaters, and that's Hot Rod. Like I love the movie Hot Rod, but I don't need to go see that on the big screen. It's
Yeah.
I won't be sad if I never get to. But granted, if the theater I'm talking about were to announce next week that they're going to show Hot Rod, I probably would go. So I don't know what I'm talking about.
I mean, hey, and in November, you and I, we get to see the 40th anniversary of Scarface at this theater.
We're finally going to get what's coming to
We're
us.
gonna get what's coming to us, man.
The World Chico.
Yeah, and you have never seen Scarface, which
No, no. I guess growing up as a little kid, my mom was lame and didn't show it to me. Yeah. So no. So that does fall into this like cloud of movies that I'll mention where when because like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, like that was shown to me, that was
yeah,
presented
yeah,
to me. I was sat down, and my dad was like, "Oh, there's this movie called Raiders of the Lost Ark. I want you to finally see it because I
yeah,
loved it so much." So Scarface is definitely one of those movies where you don't show that to a little kid, or at least you shouldn't. And then by the time I was old enough to like go out and discover movies on my own, I just never got around to it. It's not like I was against it or like I thought it didn't look good. I just never got around to it,
right.
you know.
Well,
So,
I'll just tell you this before we go in. You're not gonna watch this movie. You're gonna sit your white ass down and listen.
well, apparently that's what like a lot of dudes on MTV Cribs did. So
You're right.
there was always a copy of Scarface going on in the background.
There was always a picture of Al Pacino as Tony Montana sitting at his desk covered with mounds of snow
Yeah,
somewhere in the
yeah,
house.
yeah, yeah.
But the
He
kind
he.
of the kind of circle back, talk about like Marvel and DC movies in the theaters in general. Like, I kind of want to start going to the theaters more too because obviously during the pandemic I really cut back on that for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
And then I just haven't really gotten back into going to the theaters because most of the movies I've started watching, like mainly like Marvel, I I have Disney Plus, and I just don't see any point in me spending money to go to a movie theater and see a movie that's gonna end up on the streaming service that I'm already actively paying money for. Um, but that combined also with just my work schedule has prevented me from going to the theaters more often. But I recently started a new shift. I will have my evenings free again, so I'm hoping to actually start going to the theaters more and going back to like having a more diverse like consumption of media that isn't just Marvel. As much as I love Marvel, like there's other stuff out there, and I would like to watch the other stuff.
It's a lesson that I would say to anybody, whether you have those dudes that only watch Marvel movies and they think like cinema didn't exist before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or there's people that only watch slasher movies. Like you
Yeah,
should not only watch one type of movie. I can't imagine a more boring existence than only consuming one genre or brand of something. Like you
yeah.
got to mix it up. You got to see other stuff. So,
But kind of go into what I've been getting into lately. And it was kind of something it was something we both did. I've recently sort of rediscovered my love of professional wrestling. Because to
yeah.
give you a backstory, like when I was a kid, I fucking loved wrestling. Like, my stepdad actually introduced it to me when I was a kid because
Hmm.
he would watch WCW, and he introduced me to it. I got into it, and I would watch WCW every week. Starting off with Monday Nitro and then Thursday Thunder when they introduced that show, and I watched that every week until I still vividly remember watching the episode where Vince McMahon showed up on WCW announcing that he bought the whole company, and that blew my like 9-year old mind,
Yeah.
that could happen. And
Yeah.
I watched wrestling up until about college. Like when I was getting like my junior senior year, I started to like not really be as interested in it as much. And then by the time I got to college, I pretty much just stopped watching it altogether, and just kind of felt like it's just really hokey and goofy and corny and silly and all these other derivative adjectives that I could throw out there. And I just kind of got into the mindset that a lot of other people who aren't fans of it get into, where it's like, oh, it's stupid, it's fake, it's all this other stuff. Um, and I remember, like our friend Trevor really like put me in my place kind of one time where I made a joke about it because there was like a ad for a WWE pay per view on the radio, and I said something like, "I can't believe people pay good money to watch that shit." And Trevor said, "Yeah, I can't believe people pay good money to watch their favorite fictional characters fight each other." And you know what? He got me. I didn't have a response to that. He got me.
You
Um,
gotcha.
but shortly after that, especially during the pandemic, I sort of like somehow I just kind of like stumbled across like some stuff on like my Facebook timeline and like my YouTube recommended feed of just wrestling related stuff, and I just started kind of like watching it on the peripheral of my circle of my universe here.
Hmm.
Um, and then like after a little bit of that, I started like actively watching it again, and yeah, I really rediscovered my love of pro wrestling, especially with the creation of AEW. Um, like yeah, it's goofy, it's over the top, but that's the point. It's all entertainment. It's supposed to be the way it is. So
I
I
mean,
I really appreciate and respect it a lot more now. And you and I, we got to go to a wrestling show recently in Baltimore. We went and saw AEW live,
right.
and that what a fucking blast that was.
So, I'll just give a quick little sum up of my perception and opinion of this world that you just we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, just kind of the environment and atmosphere that I grew up in.
Hmm.
Um, I just grew up assuming that if you were like really, really into wrestling, you were stinky and a dummy. I just I just thought it was for like big dum dums who smell bad. Um, and was that unfair of me? Sure, yes, but you can't deny that there is a stigma to it.
There
There
is.
does seem to be and that's it's and
And honestly, ironically enough, a lot of that is because of Vince McMahon.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it
but
didn't help,
that's a different can of worms entirely. But go ahead.
Yes, yes, yes. Obviously, I don't think you know having like you know challenging Donald Trump to a double dog dare of who would shave whose head was good brand ambassadorship. But yeah, so I was just like, no, I was never interested. I stayed away from it or whatever. But like, it's all about having fun. And I'll tell you
Yeah,
what, the way I'm standing right now, from the point I'm standing at, I can understand someone watching wrestling and having fun with that more so than somebody who watches fucking golf.
yeah,
So like, yeah, it's just all about like, what are you having fun with? Like going to something with your buddies and having a good laugh and a chuckle. And yeah, like, fun is fun. Like,
yeah,
and it's like, you can say, oh, but it's fake. It's like, well, then that's all the more reason to defend its innocence. It's not real anyway. It's not like, they're up there beating women and feeding them to like lions in the Coliseum or whatever. Like,
right.
just have fun. Just
Well, it's
have
also
fun.
it's like it's fake. Well, so is like all these Marvel movies that everybody watches, and you can't tell me you don't watch them. They're making billions of dollars. Somebody's watching them. So yeah, it's fake. Well, so are all these movies you go to. It's the same thing. Like
And you know what else was fake? Mark McGuire having all those home runs because he was on steroids. So like,
yeah,
where does your logic begin and end?
right.
Um. So yeah. So we went, and I mean, right out of the gate, I was like, "This is going to be a good night," because we went to the. Well, I saw Panic at the Disco at this venue, and it was the Royal Farms Arena. But now it's named after a bank or
I
something.
forget
But
which bank, but yeah.
yeah, it's one of the main arenas, or downtown Baltimore. Um, and uh, we we had to go to the bathroom,
Hmm.
and I go to the urinal. I do my business, and I'm at I'm at the sink washing my hand, and I was pretty sure I saw what I saw in the mirror, but I was like, nah, man, I'm out of it. Someone's just wearing like a jacket or something like that. I look up, there was straight up a dude dressed like Nacho Libre.
Mask, cape, and everything.
Like he legit, he it wasn't like any, like, spirit Halloween nonsense. Like, he was dressed like Nacho
Like
Libre.
he could have gotten into the rain, and everybody would have believed him.
Yes, yes. And I look up, and I just is like, I immediately appreciate like the irony and just the satire of it. And
Yeah.
I look up and I'm like, that's awesome. I dry my hands, I turn to him, and he's in character. Like, he's saying, yes, my friend, or whatever. And I turn to him and I go, can I please take a picture with you? And he goes, oh, yes, I would love to take a picture with you in the bathroom. And I go, no, 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 no. We're going to step outside real quick and we'll take it there. So we go outside. And I forget where exactly you were, but we were with your buddy, and my buddy too now. But we were, Devin was waiting outside. And I was like, Devin, I walk up. He looks up. His face just fucking lights up. And there was no like, seriously, or you got to be kidding me. I just walk right up and I go, can you take a picture with me with this guy? And he goes, yes.
What was
And
funny about that is I was in the bathroom. I think I went in the bathroom either right before or right after you. I can't remember the exact timing here, but I saw him using the urinal as I walked into the bathroom. And I use the bathroom. I do my thing. I wash my hands. I come out. I find you and Devin. And the first thing out of my mouth is, guys, I saw fucking Nacho Libre in the bathroom. And like somehow in that time frame is when you managed to get the photo because you just immediately pull your phone out and show it to me.
yes, because I was like, listen, I could take a million selfies here, but this is the only picture that anyone would be like, okay, that's awesome. Um,
What it's like playing Kingdom Hearts.
yes. So then this was the birth of you and I making a new inside joke, which was, it just reminded me of the TV spot for Kingdom Hearts where it would do like the simple and clean remix,
Hmm.
and it just ends with, "You never know who you'll run into next." Kingdom Hearts. And I'm just like, this needs to be what we say from now on whenever we bump into a random cosplay. Just, you never know who you'll bump into next. Dot dot dot. Kingdom Hearts. So yeah, that was awesome. But yeah, I mean, get into the rest of it.
Well, the rest of it just we went to the show, and I mean, it was. I mean, first off, I just remember walking in to like where the actual seats were and just seeing the arena and just going, "Holy shit!" Like
Those were good seats. Like
those were
like
good
props to
seats.
Devin. Those were, and he didn't like. and I was like, okay, if I'm gonna go to this, I don't want to pay like I don't want it to be too expensive, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but like, so he didn't get us like shitty seats, but like he also did wasn't like, okay guys, like that'll be like $500. Like,
yeah,
no, no, no.
yeah,
He did us well. He didn't do us dirty.
yeah. But also just seeing like the production value and everything of that set, I'm like, damn, they really put this together in like a few hours. That's crazy. Um,
I
I
mean, the
mean,
dudes who put that stuff together, they really are unsung heroes. Like
yeah.
they
And then
gotta
oh, and,
travel
and
along with the show, and
and then they got to take it all down. Like they took, I guarantee they took that. They started tearing that shit down like maybe 30 minutes after we walked out of that arena.
oh yeah, yeah. So
But I mean, it was such an awesome. My only complaint was because growing up as a kid, Sting was always my favorite wrestler, and he is signed to AEW now, and he's pretty much said that like this year is his last year. Like he is retiring for good this year. So I was really hoping he would show up, and he didn't. So that was a bummer. But I mean, the show itself was awesome. It was a ton of fun. I just loved like watching different moments when something like big or outrageous would happen, or somebody would get hit with like a hell of a painful looking move, and just watching your reaction to it all.
oh
Um,
yeah.
it was just great watching you like take all of it in real time as somebody whose only exposure to wrestling at this point had been watching one single episode of Monday Night Raw like 8 years prior.
Yeah, yeah. Like that was
And it wasn't
it
even
was
a,
a
and it wasn't even a good episode of Raw.
no, but I mean, like you and I still had a good night. I just remember the best, the best moment was a commercial where it was like one of those moments where you and I just slowly looked at each other, didn't know how to react, which was them having the commercial for the next video game, and it literally just ends with pre-order WWE 2K16. Download the Terminator, and it's like, wait, I'm sorry, what? Um, and then that was also the night that I said, you know, your favorite thing about Unsolved Mysteries, which was basically what you have to understand about Robert Stack was he was the ultimate fucking narc.
Christ, what a fucking night that was.
And then the world's dirtiest man.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Does anybody believe that it's just coincidence that he finally died just a few months after taking his first bath in decades? I don't know. Maybe he died because he was elderly and he was dirty. Like,
I mean, hey, I guarantee the hole they buried him in is dirt is the cleanest he's ever been.
yeah.
But back to the AEW show. I mean, there was one moment that still like we still quote it. It's fucking the main event of the night. Fucking MJF. I love MJF. Fucking the best heel in wrestling right now.
Michael
He
J. Fox.
sure. Uh, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, for those of you
Oh,
who
okay.
don't know. He's the best heel in wrestling right now, and he never breaks character. It's just amazing to watch him at like conventions and shit. Um, but just he's having a tag team match, and it's him. I think his partner was Sammy Guevara, who came out to that fucking shitty ass DBZ inspired like Videotron.
Right. Well, yeah. We were just like,
Like that
okay,
had
all right.
us giggling for like 5 minutes straight just watching that. It was a tag team match, those two against Darby Allin, the guy with the skateboard, and I forget what the other guy was.
And you know, he didn't even use the skateboard.
No,
So
and
like,
that was so weird because like he does use the skateboard a lot, but for some reason that night when we were there, he didn't.
other people are using, you know, obviously a cliche in wrestling is to use the chair. It's like,
Yeah,
bro, you use the skateboard. Like, what? Like, do I have to write this? Like,
and I mean, dude, he does all the time, but that night he didn't for whatever reason. Um,
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I just the best part just in the middle of the match, MJF gets his ass beat and thrown out of the ring. He just grabs a mic in the middle of the match and just shouts, "Maryland is an abortion!" And just in the middle of all the boos, you just hear our little section. Just what does that even mean?
Yeah. What does that even mean? Maryland is an abortion.
And then his tag team partner grabs the mic and goes, "No, an abortion means you don't have to deal with the consequences." Maryland is worse than that.
Woof.
Oh, but no, it was a great time, and I just loved as soon as we left. Like the first words out of your mouth were just, "I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm all in."
I might even vote Republican.
No, so what do you think of wrestling now that you've gone to a show?
I mean, I want to go to another one. Like I'm all about it. Granted, like preferably hopefully a show comes to like DC and we could just take the metro cuz I'm all about that convenience.
Hmm.
Um cuz yeah, I mean, we had to like take an Uber in or a Lyft out or
Yeah.
whatever the brand was. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like after the show, we were just kind of walking around, and I was getting a little nervous. I was like, all right, is this driver showing up or not? And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, do we just cancel and order a new one? And it turned out that was just digging our hole deeper and deeper. And I mean, we saw someone just straight up like crossing the street on all fours, like with their knuckles to the ground, and it's like, all right, just
So
don't look.
also saw a rat the size of a fucking football.
Yeah, yeah, just don't look them in the eye.
That's Baltimore for you.
Yeah, yeah, but I yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like a couple weeks before that, I went to another wrestling show. I went to a New Japan show in DC. New Japan's something else. And that's one thing I really like about wrestling is like each promotion has like their own different style and flavor going on. Um, New Japan has like they have wrestlers from all over the world, so there's just all
yeah.
kinds of different styles and everything going on there. But man, I saw a dude whose nickname was the Stone Pitbull, and I saw him throw a fully grown fucking man like a goddamn frisbee. Like to say I was entertained would be an understatement.
Well, go ahead and say the John Oliver quote.
Wrestling is cooler than whatever you like, and he's right. It is.
Yeah, yeah.
No, well, we got to go to another one. I would love because like WrestleMania is in Philly next year, and that I think if we could swing that, that'd be a hell of a time.
What WrestleMania is like in April, I guess, or
Yeah, it's like very beginning of April.
yeah. It's funny because like Philadelphia is closer to us than or at least me when I looked it up, is closer than Pittsburgh. I always assumed Pittsburgh was closer than Philly. So yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
Um but yeah, so uh man, that would be something. That would be something. Oh god. You want to talk about a city that likes to fucking fight after a sporting event?
I mean, hey, that's just all the more reason we need to go to WrestleMania next year.
Oh no, they're asking for it. They're begging to get that town riled up again.
All right, well, we'll move on to our next topic. We were talking earlier when we were like talking about what we were going to discuss on the episode tonight, and we got onto
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the subreddit Ask Reddit, and one of the questions we saw was what's the dumbest thing an adult ever told you? And it just got us like talking into like our experiences as kids and like especially in like middle school. Holy shit, was middle school fucking awful. But like
Yeah, yeah.
just school in general, like some of the shit teachers told us. Um, I'll let you go because you typically have like the better stories when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Well, I definitely appreciate that, for better and for worse. But so the question of what's the dumbest thing an adult ever told you? Um, you know, most of my, bitter stories centered around school are middle school,
Hmm.
but I would still say, as far as the specific question of word for word, what is the dumbest thing that an adult ever told you? It would have to go to a third grade teacher I had. So yeah, I'm going to elementary school, and it was just one of those things where when I first heard it, I was like, "Hold on a second, what?" But then I
Hmm.
was like, but then like you know. I would try to just give adults the benefit of the doubt when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and this is echoed throughout my life where I'm like, I would almost be kind of meta and self-aware, and I would just be like, oh well, I guess this is just one of those things that I'll understand when I'm older. And then I finally get older and I look back and I go, no, that was really stupid. Yeah, that didn't make any sense. So I had a third grade teacher who she was just she was just kind of a bitch. And
Mm-hmm.
it scratched the kind of. And uh she she had this pet peeve about children being thirsty and children wanting to hydrate. It was the weirdest shit ever because like a lot of parents, my mom included, are like the opposite. They're like full on like drink, drink, drink. You're not hydrating enough. You're not hydrating enough. And even a few years ago, there was an article that came out being like, yeah, you're definitely not hydrating enough as much as you think you are in the summertime. Um, and so anyway, so we'd be out on the playground, out on the recess ground, and we'd come in, and kids would want to like go to the water fountain and
Mm-hmm.
get a drink, like wet their whistle. And she would just always act so reluctant and annoyed, and it would just always have me be like, what's the deal here? What's the problem?
Yeah.
And someone would ask to go to the water fountain, and then another kid would be like, oh yeah, can I go? And she'd be like, monkey see, monkey do. And it's like, shut the fuck up. So then finally, this comes to a head where she stops the classroom and goes, kids, what you don't understand is drinking will only make you thirstier. And it's like, what? like like insert like the meme of like Jackie Chan like holding his head with like a scrunched up face. Like I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, she's like, kids, when you're like overworked and hot and feeling dehydrated and thirsty, if you drink water, that will only make you thirstier. And it's like, what are you talking about?
And this is a
And
teacher. This is somebody who is supposed to educate children.
this,
Jesus
yeah,
Christ.
this was a teacher. This
And
was a
then
teacher.
and then they're wondering why the school system is failing.
Yeah. Um, and first of all, anyone listening in, I don't want you to assume that we're one of those people that was like, oh, I don't want you to talk to my kids about pronouns and stuff. No, that's not we're not with those people. So but yeah, like, and that would just be so disappointing. And I try to have a moment where I'm like, oh god, is this going to be one of those things that just clicks for me like when I'm older? And the older I got, I was like, what was that bitch talking about?
Yeah.
Um, and there were just other like, you know, especially of that elementary school I was referencing. Like, there was just different moments where like I look back and I'm like, I can't believe a teacher said that to a kid. Like, there was a kid who, and you'll know who I'm talking about. I don't want to name full names, but like, we'll say his first name was Rich, and I just remember he was a kid who was kind of picked on a lot, and he would forgive me for saying this, he kind of was an easy target for like, getting teased or, and even like the adults would be mean to him. And it was crazy. Like, he just had this aura, I guess. He had this like invisible target on his back that was like, it was too easy for people to mess with him. And even adults, again, were rude to him. And I remember he did a science project that involved an egg,
Mm-hmm.
like a and not hard boiled even, like if it cracked, like the yolk was going everywhere.
Yeah.
And he did a science project. We were in this like little like carpeted miniature like theater almost. It is kind of hard to like articulate. It's kind of, this was a weird school. Like, there weren't even actual classrooms. Like, the whole thing was like an open concept, and like areas were blocked off and separated by bookshelves. So like, and I didn't think of it at first, but my mom was like, yeah, that's like so cheap ass and shitty. Like, they can't even have real classrooms with doors. Um, but so fast forward, like, the teacher, and this is my second grade teacher, she was like especially like just too hardcore on him, too mean. It was mean. And she was like, if you break that egg, if you break that egg on the carpet, you're in big trouble. Even though it's like in the grand scheme of things, it's like, what, lady? Like you'll just get the janitor to do some magic on it. But
Right.
he breaks the egg, and she takes all the kids back, and she's like, legitimately like doing like some fucking Hannibal Lecter Joker shit on him, where she's just talking down to him, being like, I can't believe I asked you not to do that and you still did. I'm going to call your mom and she's going to be so disappointed in what you are.
Oh,
And this kid finally just breaks down and starts crying. Like, she
Jesus Christ.
literally broke his fucking spirit. And it was upsetting to see someone, and I was feeling things that I couldn't even articulate or elaborate yet. And so it was hard seeing someone be mean to somebody like this, but also, and I wouldn't have been able to find the words for this as a kid, but now it's like, it was definitely upsetting to see a teacher talk to a kid like this, someone who is supposed to represent authority and responsibility and fairness, and someone who is supposed to be a guardian of what's right and what's wrong. And to see that shatter in front of me at such a young age, like, really left, like, well, I mean, I'm talking about it as a 32-year-old man, like, it really left a lasting impression on me that someone who was entrusted with children, other people's kids,
Yeah.
could really go out of their way to verbally break someone like this. It's haunting. It
And if
was.
it's made that kind of impact on you, imagine what kind of impact it made on him. Like,
Yes, yes, yeah. I wouldn't have even been able to spit that out, but I'm glad you did. Like, yeah, like if I'm still thinking of it as a 32-year-old man, like, how does he feel right now?
and like how has it influenced how he, you know, acts and carries himself throughout the rest of his life?
Right, right. And how he is willing to trust other people, older people,
Yeah.
people of authority even. It's like, yeah, it's so. No, that was especially upsetting. But yeah, I don't want to hog the mic too much right out of the gate. Why don't I, take a turn or two with it for me?
Well, we were talking, like I said, we were talking earlier about middle school, and that's definitely where like most of our stories about school being dumb comes from, um, and just having really dumb teachers. But there were definitely, for me, there was definitely some moments in high school too. Like, I'm one teacher I especially when I think of like dumb moments in high school, there's one teacher I always think of immediately, and that's I'm gonna use names, I don't fucking care. Mrs. Twig. Um, you know where I'm going with this. Mrs. Twig, she was not mean. She was a nice teacher, but she had a very overinflated ego and just sense of like her importance in the lives of the children she taught. Um, Mrs. Twig taught ninth grade government, and I want to say she wasn't a bad teacher in the sense of teaching the subject matter, but she kind of was, and you'll see why I say that in a few minutes. um,
Bad or not, like, to retweet your point of her ego, like, she really thought of all the teachers, she was the main character.
oh, dude,
Like,
she thought she was Robin Williams in the Dead Poet Society, like
yeah, yeah.
because I remember one thing she would say to us all the time. One thing she would say to us all the time in class, anytime any of us got like kind of cheeky or smart or whatever, or if she was just being cheeky or smart herself, she would say, "When you walk across that stage and get that diploma, that's all the thanks I'll need." And it's like, at first I didn't think anything about it, but I remember senior year, like the day of graduation, we're all huddled in the library waiting to go out to the gym and everything, and she just kind of pops in and shouts, "You're welcome," and then leaves. And I'm like, "Bitch, I haven't seen you since ninth grade. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And it's not like your class is like, I don't want to say it's not important, but it's not like it's one of the ones that like left any sort of lasting impact on me outside of how fucking goofy you were in it.
Also, it's just, it's one of the first classes we ever had, and
Yeah,
like, it very much has this energy of, all right, let's just go ahead and get this one out of the way.
right,
Like,
right.
yeah.
And to
Let's
get
get this over with.
right, and to kind of go back to what I was saying about, she wasn't necessarily a good teacher. Let me explain to you guys listening at home how she taught us the concept of double jeopardy. So, for those who don't know, double jeopardy in the U.S. legal system, to summarize and simplify it, it basically means that you can't be charged with the same crime twice. Okay? So, the way that Mrs. Twig in ninth grade government taught us this movie was by having us watch the movie Double Jeopardy starring Ashley Judd, which is a movie that does not exemplify the concept of double jeopardy at all. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, basically Ashley Judd's husband in the movie, he goes missing on like a boating trip or whatever, and it's believed that he's been killed. And basically, the cops arrest her thinking she murdered him. She gets convicted. She goes to jail. She escapes jail because she finds out that her husband faked his murder and like married another woman or whatever. So she's pissed. She escapes jail and she kills him for real at the end of the movie. And she like straight up says to him, "It's double jeopardy. They can't convict me." And she kills him right in front of an FBI agent who's like trying to track her down after she escaped from the jail. And she kills him. And the movie just ends with the FBI agent being like, "Huh, well, good show, good job. See you later." And she just walks free. And it was one of those things where I just didn't really connect the dots at the time because I was just like, oh shit, cool, I get to watch a movie in class instead of actually doing work. But as I got older, I realized that's not how Double Jeopardy works at all. Like, if you
At that point, just show us the fugitive with Harrison Ford.
right, and it's the worst part. The worst part is she showed us that fucking movie, a movie about a woman trying to track down her cheating husband and kill him, and because she recorded it because it was shown on like TV or something. She recorded it from TV, and she censored out the curse words in the movie. Like she would, and by censored out, I don't mean she like went in with any sort of video editing software or anything. I mean at home on the VCR, she would push the record button on and off whenever somebody said a curse word. So there would be random moments where somebody would be about to say "damn," but they'd be like "damn," and then the screen would go blue for like a second, and then it would come back. And then she showed us National Treasure for whatever fucking reason. I don't even remember what topic we were covering when she showed us that. I mean, I
It
guess
has
at least National Treasure has some sort of historical accuracy to it, but still, Jesus
yeah,
Christ.
it has the Declaration of Independence in it, and she just went, "All right, well, it's all in a day's work."
Right?
Um, I just remember she was like, and granted, she's saying this to like, you know, what 15-year-olds or whatever. Like,
13, 14.
yeah, I remember she was like straight up like talking about Hillary Clinton conspiracy theories. It's like you cannot say that to kids in a school like during your job. Like,
And the thing is, you've mentioned that to me before, and it's so weird because when I had her, she was very critical of Republicans and Republican policies, like openly.
yeah, I mean, unless she's just like the extreme independent, where every few years she just kind of licks her finger and sticks it up to the wind, and is like, "Oh, okay, it's cool to do this now."
I feel bad making fun of her because, like I said, she was not mean at all. At least not usually. She could be when she wanted to be, but she wasn't mean. She was just a really lousy teacher.
There was definitely just. I'm sorry. Okay, in all seriousness, there was definitely some moments where she was just flat out just fucking wrong about something.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but let's move on. What's another juicy one you got?
Oh, how about you
I
go
I I,
next?
I started I started out with two, so you owe me a second one, and then I'll go again.
You started out with two. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
because you had the third grade teacher and the second grade teacher.
yeah. In the immortal words of Jay Leno in the Birdcage. Now you've probably heard a lot of terrible stories. Here's another one. Um, I remember one story. Uh, one story, and I just told it, middle school, back to middle school. Not about the teachers. I'm gonna do a student this time, and
Real quick, can we just talk about how fucking shitty our middle school was in general before you go into this story?
they didn't even light the
They did
hallways.
not light the school was perpetually like 70% dark.
Yeah, like they didn't even have light bulbs in the hallways. It's like,
Yeah.
what was that about?
Like they really went out of their way to make that school look and feel like a prison.
Yes, and it's like okay, that's what every little kid says about middle school. It's like no,
No.
like no, like this was just such a nexus of bad energy
Dude,
of like
I remember like hearing other like parents straight up say to my mom like I can't believe how they treat and speak to the kids in the school.
yeah, and like most of the teachers didn't even like kids,
No.
especially when I went there, where the principal hated kids. And it's like, why do you work in the school system? Why do you
Yeah.
work at a school? Like, you don't even like kids. Like, what are you doing here? Um,
It's just a way to have some sort of authority over someone.
uh,
Power
or,
trip.
or it's just because they wanted weekends, holidays, and summers off.
Also
Like,
true.
so the hallways were dark. The teachers, it was like, it was this huge like double standard. Like everybody talked out of both sides of their mouth. Like it was so jarring to go from elementary school where we had recess time, we had time to like go on the playground, let out some energy, let off some steam, to like going to no recess whatsoever at all. And everything
They
is just sitting in.
instead of recess, they gave you a study hall period where you weren't even allowed to do homework.
Yeah, no, you had to read. And it's like,
Dumbest shit ever.
yeah, and it's like, at least let that be. Well, you should have done that last night. Okay, well, what if some shit came up? Like what? Like
Yeah, like
I,
I remember like the very first what didn't they call it like mini course or something like that?
yeah, which is like, what does that even mean? That's the
Yeah,
dumbest name ever.
just call it study hall, but whatever. I remember the very first one of those I was in. Like I was sitting there doing my math homework because that was like my last class of the day, and like the day before I had gotten math homework, and I just thought like, oh well, whatever. I can just do it during this free period. I don't have to worry about it, during my evening at home. And I'm sitting there doing it, and the teacher legit walks up, grabs the paper out of my notebook, and just crumbles it, and just says, "You're not allowed to do homework during mini course." And I legit said, "Then what's the point? Like, why are
Yeah,
we here?"
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
fucking stupid.
No, no, and that was just another one of those moments where it's like, oh well, maybe I'm just a little kid and I'll understand when I'm older. No, we're
Nope.
older now, and it's like, yeah, what was the point of that?
Yeah.
Um, See, and they also like, so they were all about like, you're growing up. This is the real world. Like, we're not gonna baby you anymore. Like, and it's like you don't trust us to
Yeah.
do anything. You don't trust us to just be left to our own devices. You don't trust us to just kind of have some time to ourselves. But then like, you're all about like treating us like we're full-fledged adults now, and we're legal and legal adults. And but we weren't even allowed to like sit wherever we wanted at lunchtime. Like, we
Nope.
went to the cafeteria and we were told where to sit,
Yeah.
and it was like, you have to sit with your class. Why? Like, why can't I just have this moment? Why can't I just have one period where I actually get to be around people that I actually want to be around?
Yeah.
It's not my fault that like, I have friends not only in another class but on a different floor, or like, you had like gray teams and blue
Or
teams,
even in
or
a different lunch period.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like, why weren't we allowed to have anything? We could have nothing. Like,
Yeah.
we couldn't have anything for whatever reason. And then they like had the gall, the audacity to scratch their heads and wonder why everyone was always in such a bad mood and everyone acted shitty. And it's like, you're making us feel shitty.
Yeah.
um this is a rant that I wanted to go on, recorded for a very long time. um so it was just weird. It was like okay, and it was like, okay, well, um in real life, you can't just sit wherever you want when you eat. Yeah, you can. What are you talking about? Like, if I go out to Burger King and some guy I don't like sits at the table next to me, I can get up and go to another table. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think you're preparing me for? Um,
Prison.
yeah, yeah. And it's like, and so they made a bunch of people sit down and eat near each other who didn't even get along. And then they wonder why there were always fights in the cafeteria. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's because you're forcing, like, you know, people to sit next to their antithesis
Yeah.
almost. Um, so, so I'm still going to try to avoid names. So we've done stories about the teachers. I'm going to do a story about a classmate. Um, and you'll know who I'm talking about. So let's say this guy's name is Trent. Um, Trent was a prick. And um, he was just a very like negative and mean person. Like he was a bully. Like he was a full-fledged bully. He thought he was hot shit just because he could grow a mustache in the 6th grade.
If you want to call that a
And
mustache.
yeah, yeah. And and I just remember like getting shit from this dude for all 3 years of middle school. And fast forward, like he's still a bad person today. And it's just amazing because like, wow, after all these years, like you're still a loser. Um, so he so flash forward to 8th grade. Um, there's this one class where he's just like making me the butt of every joke. Like he's just not holding back on me. Everything was just a quip at my expense. Like, oh, that's Blake, or I bet Blake likes that, or I bet Blake does that. So finally, we're watching like a slideshow, and I just forget the context of the moment, but a goofy slide comes up, and I beat him by a second because he's going to go say, oh, that's what Blake looks like. So then before he could finish that, I go, that's what Trent looks like. Shit, motherfucker. You can edit this in post. So I go, that's what Trent looks like. And he stops and starts screaming at me, dude, shut the fuck up. I'll kill you. Like, like just going off, like having a meltdown. So then the teacher, who a lot of other students get along with, she was always fine with me because I guess she saw that I just unfortunately didn't test very well, so I got put in with a lot of the troublemakers.
Hmm.
Um, she seemed fine with me, and she straight up calls him out to his face, just straight up squashes it right then and there. She goes, "You were literally going to say the exact same joke about him. Like, what are you upset about?" He stops and says to her, "Are you calling me a liar?" And she goes, "That's that's not even a compatible response to what I just said." So then he continues like spiraling out of control and swirling the drain and like having a meltdown. And he keeps trying to like say, talk all this shit, and none of it is coherent. And if anything, it contradicts itself. And he's just like not making any sense. And he starts to slowly realize whatever he's trying to spit out doesn't make any sense. And as I said to you when I first told you the story, this clearly was the day when he finally realized that he was stupid.
And boy,
And
was he fucking stupid.
and he keeps trying to say all this stuff, and everyone's like, Trent, that doesn't even make any sense. Or Trent, what are you talking about? And he keeps trying to like make all this shit talk, all this bullshit. And he eventually gets sent out to the hallway, and then he gets sent to the office. For whatever reason, I never got called to the office because we know if there was one thing this school loved to do, it was punish the victim just as much, if not more, than the offender.
Yeah, they did.
Um, I mean, shit, like they made victim blaming an Olympic sport.
Hmm.
Um, so, and we'll get into this, we'll get into this later. And yeah, we can even do a part 2 to this discussion in a future episode because you and I have like a treasure chest of stories. But um, he gets sent to the office, and then, you know, whatever, the period ends. Period ends. I go to my locker. He shows up. He's getting books out of his locker, and he starts being like, Blake, I swear to God, if you say one more fucking thing to me, I'm going to lose it. So then at that point, I just felt so like, okay, I obviously have the upper hand here intellectually. So I probably should have kept my mouth shut and just let it go. But I was like, okay, so it's okay for you to say all kinds of shit to me for 3 years, but then you can't even handle one like one comeback that wasn't even really that deep. And he then starts chasing after me, screaming, almost like crying, really. And his girlfriend had to stop him and calm him down. He starts holding his head and being like, I can't do this anymore. And like, this guy was really having an identity crisis that like he already peaked in the 6th grade. Like, it was it was incredible. I'd never seen anything like it. Like, I, again, like, this was the day that he finally realized, oh, I'm an idiot. Like, I'm dumb.
I
Um,
honestly kind of envy you for being able to witness that. Like, being able to witness somebody realizing, like, what their limits actually are.
yeah, it's just like it was like a fictional character realizing that they aren't real, like becoming meta. Um, yeah, or yeah, it was just almost like somebody realizing that they are in a bad movie or a lame show. Like, I don't know. I would pay hundreds of dollars to just have like a documentary like showcasing this day. Um, but yeah, I mean that's another story I got on me. What you got any others right now?
Yeah, I'll close out this segment with one last story, something stupid that happened to me in high school. Um, See, we've told stories about students, teachers. We haven't told stories about stuff that like actually happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like I remember it was like ninth grade, and this is the dumbest thing that has ever happened to me, hands down. We're in lunch, and I'm sitting there with people I normally sat with during lunch. Uh, my friend Zach at the time and his girlfriend at the time, Renee, were sitting at the lunch table, and like Renee has like a loose string on like the bottom of her pant leg, so she pulls it off. She throws it at Zach, and Zach is just goofing off. He takes it, throws it at me. I throw it back at him, and it's just this little back and forth of us goofing off, throwing this string back and forth at each other. Literally, just a string. So a couple times doing that, all of a sudden the health teacher at Allegheny High School at the time comes up. I forget what the fuck her name was, but she comes up and she just starts yelling at us, and then immediately writes all three of us up for throwing a string. And like she even wrote on the slip where she wrote us up saying like reason for it was throwing a string in the cafeteria. And I don't know what was dumber. I don't know if what was the dumbest part of this whole thing. The fact that because we all got detention for it too. They gave us detention for it.
Mm,
And I don't know what was the dumbest part about this whole transaction was her writing us up for it. Like instead of just being like, "Hey, knock it off, don't do that," quit screwing around. Just
yeah.
immediately went for the nuclear option and wrote us up. So it's like, what was the dumber part here? Her writing us up for that, the main office upholding it and giving us the sentence of detention, or my mother and stepdad agreeing with it and grounding me for getting in trouble. Like, I don't know what part was dumber in that whole thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Of it, just what a waste of energy to expel that like enforcement,
yeah,
like just what an absolute waste of energy, really. There's no other way to say it.
and
And I know who
the
you're talking about. I know who you're talking about. And just as a quick like um parallel story, and I'm making this a tweet size version, don't worry, and because I want to get back to what you were saying. Um she wrote somebody else up another time for, and I have the picture of the slip. She wrote up a friend of mine, Austin, for now granted, this was probably more worthy of that because you were like basically tossing a thread,
yeah,
whatever. My friend Austin drew drew a male genitalia on a paper airplane and was throwing it around. She caught it, wrote it up, and it says throwing around graffiti, parentheses, flying penis. So,
And it's like moments like that. It's like is it something that like you should tell the kid? Like, is it worth disciplining? Okay, yeah, sure, disrupting the class and all that. But like, do you really have to write the kid up? Like, I don't know. Just a lot of that shit. I felt like just it just would have been a lot easier if you were just like, hey, don't do that. Like,
I mean, yeah, I would say, I mean, it's all stupid, right? The whole
yeah,
thing's stupid.
yeah,
With the person who wrote you up themselves, they were a lost cause. They're out of it. Like their brain is like gelatin, whatever.
yeah,
Um, the Office, I would say it was dumber of The Office than it was of the person who wrote you up because The Office, multiple people should have been able to look at that and be like, "Hey, we have people that like call in bomb threats and like
yeah,
and threaten murder and
yeah,
like hurt and physically harm other people. Like we don't have time for stuff like this."
yeah.
Like she almost should have gotten penalized. And you know what? A math teacher of mine at the time, her, I guess it doesn't matter now, but at the time her last name was Murray. She actually, and I felt bad for her because she did have the bad luck of getting like a lot of the misbehaving students, and
Hmm.
eventually the office started like slapping her wrist and like almost wagging their finger at her, being like, "Oh, you give out too many detentions and write-ups. You must not be that good of an enforcer. Like you need to get your kids under control." And it's like, well, like what exactly do you want her to do then?
Yeah,
Um, start hitting knuckles with rulers? Like
right.
what? And so yeah, they almost should have had that in this. They almost should have had that same energy towards the person you're talking about, being like, "Hey, like this is a waste of everyone's time. Like you need to get yourself in check. Like don't be sending us this bullshit."
Yeah,
Um, and then to your parents, there was something you said about your mom that was very profound. It was the most important thing you had ever said about her, and you said she didn't teach you how to succeed. She just tried to teach you how to not screw up, which is not the same thing at all.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember coming home with that detention slip and just immediately getting grounded. Like, I remember my aunt hearing about the story, and even my aunt was like, said straight up said to my mom, "This is fucking stupid." And I got grounded, and I don't know if it was my kid, I probably would have just gone up to the school and been like, "He's not serving this detention." Like, because I rode the bus home, so if it was my kid who had to ride the bus home because I'm at work whenever he's getting off school and everything, I would have just been like, he's not serving this detention. Like you want him to serve a detention for throwing a strain and make me like take time out of my schedule to like pick him up after school? Like no, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why like the whole like after school, and then like I don't know when this like got phased out because I guess it was around in the 80s, but like serving detention on a Saturday,
Yeah,
it's like other people have lives. Like,
yeah,
there are like single moms who are like picking up extra shifts and stuff like that. Like, how do you, like, people don't have time for that. Like,
yeah,
that's why of all the things, in school suspension made the most sense because it's during school hours and it's like, just put them in an isolated room is in like it's a whole other ball of wax. Don't get me wrong, like it's a
yeah,
whole other ball of wax, but at least that made more sense because it's like you're not like creating this ripple or domino effect of messing up like families' personal lives and free time outside of the school day.
yeah,
So, for whatever it's worth, like, granted, like, no, I don't think like kids should be put in isolation. I'm just saying that seemed to be the cleanest, I guess, structure or frame.
Well, it's also the
Yeah.
fucking mentality and rules of the actual detention itself was fucking stupid because I remember serving that detention going in, and the teacher that was like, I guess he was the guy who was babysitting everybody who was serving detention that day. He came in and he said, you're going to be here for this amount of time. You have to do work. You can't do anything else. You have to do school work. And if you don't have any schoolwork to do, then leave, and you're gonna have to serve detention another day. And I didn't like in my mind. I'm just like, what? No, fuck you. Like I'll just sit. Like no. Like, what kind of fucking sense does that make? And one kid just like raised his hand. He raised his hand. Teacher pointed at him, and he asked the teacher. He said, I don't have any schoolwork, but is it okay if I read? And the teacher said to him, you spoke in the middle of detention, so leave. Come back and serve your detention another day. It's like, motherfucker, you called on him. Like, he asked for permission to speak. What the fuck is this?
It was also like it was the reverse of mini course. It's like you
Yeah,
need to work on schoolwork, motherfucker. This is what I'm trying to do during the school day. Like what?
right.
what
And I mean, I didn't have any schoolwork that day either, but I'm like, I'm not fucking coming back here another day. So I pulled out my math book and pretended to like be doing work. I was just writing down random equations and shit. Like,
yeah, yeah.
and it's just like, yeah, I left like 45 minutes later. I was like, wow, I really learned my lesson there, whatever it was.
No, yeah, exactly. They didn't. That was the problem. That was why it was a never-ending thing because like they didn't teach kids to try to do better. They just taught them to not get caught.
Yeah, yeah,
They're like, if you're gonna do some bullshit, just don't get caught doing it.
right.
That's what they taught you.
Because we don't want to put in the energy to correct you.
Yeah, and it's like God forbid we sit down and maybe have a conversation about it.
And then they wonder why the school system's failing.
Yeah,
And they wonder
and
why
again,
kids these days are so difficult.
yeah, yeah. Well, that was definitely some stuff I wanted to talk about for a long time. I would like to return to the subject of school stories in a future episode for sure.
In fact, we'll do a follow up episode talk about school stories, and we'll hold the episode at the actual school.
All right.
Yeah, I wonder if that one like this is something we talked about before too, especially with our middle schools. Like there were people on the faculty and staff that like weren't fucking teachers, but they weren't like actual administrative roles either. They were glorified hall monitors.
They were just there, and
Yeah.
like I remember Andrew, a friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, Andrew. He talked about that. He would mention a certain person. He'd be like, "Yeah, he's one of those guys where like you don't know who he is or what he does. He's just there."
Yeah. It's like, what do you do here other than
Yeah,
harass kids?
yeah, yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and close our episode out. Last few episodes we've been going to Reddit and we've been going to the subreddit Am I the Asshole? But we're going to mix it up a little bit today. We're going to go to the subreddit Ask Reddit. And we found a good question for us to answer here that I think we can get some good, juicy discussions out of. Question is, what is the biggest red flag you ignored? You okay?
No, I'm good. I was waiting for you to go ahead.
I just heard a bunch of stuff crash. I thought you fell. Um,
Oh no, I just bumped into like this Tonka truck thing that my daughter rides around on.
oh, neat. You go first.
Oh, okay. Okay. Um, a big red flag that I ignored was I'm gonna go with a particular story, and maybe I can't sum it up as like, you know, like oh they chewed with their mouth open, or oh
Yeah.
they but like I'll go to a certain story. So someone I dated,
Hmm.
and uh, you know, I'll say one of my first girlfriends. Um, and you knew her too, and we would all hang out together. There's a certain night that you and I love dunking on, which
Yeah.
was and I want your help telling me this story because I always love hearing about my stories from the perspective of how other people digested it. Um, there was a night where she was known to be very grumpy and crabby, and there were just some nights like she was really looking for an argument.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember there was one night we were all going to go to Denny's. It was like 12:30, 1 a.m.
No, man, it
And
was way early. It was not that late.
it wasn't that late.
No, it was actually one of like the few normal times we went to Denny's. Like it was like maybe somewhere between 7 and 9 o'clock.
Okay. Well, for whatever reason, she was she was finishing up a shift there, and um, yeah, she was finishing up a shift at the job we worked at, and she was I was texting her asking like, oh, how much longer do you think you'll be here? No rush. Like we could just go in and get a table. And she goes, well, I'm already on my way now. And I was like, oh, okay, my bad. And I said something to the tune of, oh, okay, my bad. I wasn't trying to assume you'd be. I just some nights you just never know. I didn't know if one of our coworkers was gonna hold you up with like busy work or whatever. And she texts back dot dot dot, you don't have to be an asshole about it. And it's like, oh, okay. So she arrives, she gets out of her car, and you like to mention just the way she stepped out of her car. You immediately knew, oh, this is going to be one of those nights where nobody has fun, is it?
Yeah.
And and
Whenever she would get in one of those moods, it was like a bucket of ice water on the entire group.
yeah, um, and she gets out. The first thing she says to me is, "Are you going to be an asshole all night?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And it why don't you help me fill in the blanks here? What was the exchange from what you remember between her and I?
Well, I remember just like you said, the way she not even just the way she got out of her car, just the way she pulled into the parking spot with her car. Like this woman knew how to communicate with her driving. And I don't mean that in a good way.
Yeah,
She was on the verge of losing her license more than once. But just the way she pulled in and the way she got out, it was very obvious. Like, it's gonna be one of those fucking nights with her. Um, and yeah, she gets out of the car, and the first thing she says to you, I don't think it was, "Are you going to be an asshole all night?" But it was something more along the lines of, "Why are you in such a pissy mood today?" And you literally just said to her, like in the most calm voice possible, you were just like, "I'm not." And yeah, and she said something about like, "Well, the way you were texting me earlier, it sounds like you are. Do you have a problem or something? Is there something we need to talk about?" And you were just like, "No, everything's fine. I'm sorry that my text came off that way. I really didn't mean it that way. I'm completely fine. I'm sorry." And she just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and asking you, needling you over and over. And then we get inside and we're at the table. We get seated, and she's still pushing you about it. Like, why are you in such a bad mood? And you finally just go, "I don't know what you want from me because I told you I'm not in a bad mood." And then you keep asking me why I'm in a bad mood, putting me in a bad mood. I don't know what you want from me. And then she just starts crying, like not even like just a silent cry. Like there's no noise coming from her, but there's just tears, just like it's like a faucet coming out of her eyes. And it's like honestly, that was more awkward than if she had just made a giant scene and stormed out, in my opinion.
right.
And she just sat there and silently cried for like the rest of dinner, which Christ, talk about the Last Supper.
Jesus. So, I guess the red flag here is someone being antagonistic, but then playing the victim, or someone trying to victimize someone else, but then still wanting to be the victim themselves. Um, it
It's
was,
also just a extreme case of emotional immaturity.
yeah, it was definitely a moment that very much spoke to me that like this has gone on too long, and I don't know how I am of all times, because I'm usually pretty, I usually have a pretty good memory with like friend, my friendships and all of our social history and whatnot. But I really am fuzzy on where this night landed on the timeline. And I don't know how much longer it went on after this night, but it was just really speaking to me like this has gone on too long. And you can't. This isn't the person you're going to be with forever.
If I remember
And
correctly, it was that happened closer to the end than the beginning for sure.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess my thing is how close to the
I
end
if
was it?
I want to say you guys were still together for the better part of a year after that happened.
Oh, and that was a year to like
That
yeah.
was 3 years
I mean,
too long.
I really should have stood up that night and been like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not happy. I don't plan on doing this forever anyway. So I may as well just end it now
Yeah.
and left. And I just I wouldn't say she's to blame at all. Is really at the end of the day, I'm the only person to blame. It's just I just really wasted so much of my youth and that stage and phase of my life. Just my the first half of my 20s. Um, so yeah, I mean that night kind of was a red flag that like I would I didn't act on and I should have. So that's one example I have for now.
Okay. Well, red flag I ignored. Since we're talking about exes, I'll talk about my most recent one. Yeah. So my most recent ex, I've mentioned her on the show before. She was rough, and she very much had a problem with alcohol, and how much of it she would consume and how she would react after consuming it. So this was because we were together for about just under a year, and I want to say this particular incident I'm thinking of happened. This was maybe like 3 or 4 months into it. Um, I'm at her place. We're hanging out, because she lived an hour out of town. So every weekend I would drive to her place and stay there for the weekend and come back like Monday morning. So we're at her place and we're just hanging out, and she, of course, starts drinking. And I think we were either watching something on TV or playing like a board game or something. I can't remember what we were doing exactly, but as she's drinking, she's just getting like more and more like frustrated about something. Um, and she just starts getting really antsy and upset. And I'm just like, I literally don't know what to do because I don't know what you're upset about. Like it was like a light switch. She just went from, like we're just hanging out, having a decent time, and then all of a sudden just she's all upset and sad. And eventually I just had to be like, I can't help you sort this out because I don't understand what the problem is because you're not actually talking to me. You're just being pissy around me. And what she said to me was, she said, I feel like you shouldn't be here because I don't know how to be a girlfriend to anybody. I don't know how to be a girlfriend to anybody, and I don't know if I want to be a girlfriend to anybody. I mean, and she said, if you want a girlfriend, I can help you find a girlfriend, but I don't think that should be me because I don't know how to be a girlfriend. And I totally just let that shit fly right over my head. Um,
Yeah.
I should have taken that moment to just be like, well, see you later then, and just went home. But I didn't. And instead, what I did was I let it simmer for like a week and brought it up the next week and was just like, and just said, like, I don't know where we stand from here. I don't want us to be over. But it sounds like you want it to be over. And she flipped the script and was like, no, I was just having a bad night. I didn't mean any of that, which would become a recurring theme in our relationship. She would say or do something very hurtful and be like, I didn't mean it. You're taking things too seriously. Um, but yeah, that was the red flag I should have paid attention to, but didn't. And luckily it wasn't a very long relationship, but it was still a very taxing one, a very exhausting one, and it really I'm sure it's affected how I'm going to proceed with all relationships going forward.
Whew. I I don't necessarily remember this specific story. Um,
I don't think I told it to you.
but a part that definitely stands out to me is if you need me to help you find a girlfriend, I can do that. It's like what kind of a trade off is that? It's like, hey, I don't
Yeah.
think we should date anymore, but I can put out an ad in the yellow pages for you. Like I don't like what is that offer? Like um
Does she drink like you?
uh, so well, I'm sorry you had to put up with that. I mean, there's definitely I don't know. You definitely have more sore, sour feelings towards the person in your story than I do to the person in my story. I obviously don't.
I wouldn't say I feel very sour towards her at this
Well,
point.
that
Like,
yeah, I don't know the sentence I want to say, but I guess like I I don't know. I definitely wish the person in my story well. Don't wish them ill. Like you know, be happy with whatever you go on to do, but yeah, unfortunately, I think at the end we definitely were a kind of a waste of each other's time, and that's sad.
yeah,
In some ways, that's almost more heartbreaking than in a much more passionate breakup.
yeah,
Um, that it was just kind of like, oh, they say like better to have tried and failed than it have not happened at all. Like, no, I honestly do believe that we would have been better off just being more available to ourselves
oh
at
yeah,
that time in our life.
oh totally. Like, and I feel the same way about the ex I just told that story about. Like, I don't hate her. I don't sit here and wish for something bad to happen to her. I hope she ends up in a happier place than where she was the last time I saw her. Um, but that being said, like, yeah, if I could, like, it's the one relationship in my life that if I could go back in time and just erase it from the timeline entirely, I would do it in a heartbeat because
Right.
I nothing of valuable substance was gained from that year of being with that person at all.
And it's so weird because like you know there was there was um there was another relationship that I would be in. There was another one that I was in where its ending was a lot more upsetting
Hmm.
and and I guess depressing and heartbreaking. But in an interesting, ironic way, I still wouldn't erase that one because I feel like with that one, I learned much more about myself and about who I would want to go on to be.
Hmm.
um, as opposed to with the other one that was ironically or interesting enough a relationship that lasted much longer. I just feel like a lot of that was filler and dead space
Hmm.
and little of substance. um, and it's kind of interesting how that can happen, like you'll have one relationship that goes on for years and you just are like, yeah, there's just it was just kind of empty. There wasn't much there. And then you'll have another relationship that lasted just maybe months, and you felt like you felt more in that short period and lived more in that short period than you did in the one where you had more time. Um, so that's why at the end it really comes down to moments instead of minutes, I would say. So
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the difference between, like we mentioned earlier, the difference between watching pro wrestling and golf. I mean, one's safer, but it's really fucking boring.
yeah, so yeah, yeah, that's a good way to bring it full circle.
Yeah,
Well, that was a pretty good return for now.
yeah. A lot of people are going to be listening to this episode and be like, "Wow, these guys went really deep with this one." Now I see why Don John was depressed for 4 months.
That's okay. Sometimes it's okay to show your thoughts are a little sometimes it's okay to show that your thoughts are a little heavier than you've been letting on lately.
Yeah,
So, well, thanks for that.
All right, well, let's wrap it up and put it in the fridge. Unless you got anything else you want to add.
No, I'm good. Let's call it.
All right, we'll call it, put it on hold, and then hang up.
Man, fuck you.
Fuck you.
Again, I got to stop with the inside
Yeah,
jokes
we
because
gotta
people are
stop
like,
bringing up the inside jokes. Everybody's gonna be upset that we're not like bringing them in on it.
I mean, for whatever it's worth, I have a coworker who absolutely loves all of the stories about us, and you would think like I am telling him the lore and canon to
Jesus
an
Christ.
expanded universe. Like he eats it up. So yeah.
Well, it's good to know that we're inspiring future generations.
So
All right, well, on that note, we will call it good episode, good return. Hopefully, be back next, well, not next week, but the week after with another episode. Hopefully, get back on that routine of new episode every other Monday. Follow us on all the social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit at Fat Minute Radio, and you can also follow me on all those things at Don John Laughs as well. You can follow BVJ at Puka Saucy. On that note, thank you, fuck you, good night.